Hello, everyone. Neil, thanks for joining me.
Hey, how's it going? Good to be joining the virtual stage with you again.
Yes, it's 2024. Welcome.
What I could have sworn a couple of weeks ago it was 2023. How did we get here so fast?
I don't know.
I don't get it.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Well, it's good to see you in this format a bit. Again, it's been too long. So thanks for everyone for joining. I'm Matt Eberhart. I'm joined by our CISO, Neal Bridges. Forgive me, it's been a day. Already today, I've called Neil CTO. I think I've forgotten what city he lives in. So, all you out there, wish me luck today.
I,
But
I if we can make it through this, just you and I, buddy, we got this.
we got it. We got it. We got this. We got this. So, wow. First of all, I can't believe it's
Yeah.
2024. But before we get to 2024, let's talk about 2023. Over the holidays, you got a little bit of downtime. You were able to kind of put your thoughts down on paper. Like, what did you kind of recap in 2023? I think we'll probably start there. And then everybody loves a good prediction conversation, security, right? So we have to get into our predictions for 2024. But let's start with 2023. What surprised you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to remind chat really quick. Listen, if you're listening to this webinar, we love questions. If you've seen Matt and I on other streams and in our other social medias, we absolutely love to hear from you. So if you think I got it right, if you think I got it wrong, if you want me to dive further into any of these things, or Matt, you want Matt's opinion on it? Hopefully he's got some caffeine between this morning. Please drop your questions in the chat. We've got our great team from Query grabbing those questions and making sure that Matt and I get them. Oh, look at that! He's got the Atlanta Braves cup out too. So yeah, I was, and again, I'll ask the query team to drop the link for the blogs into chat so that you can see them respectively, so you can go read my 2023 one. But I was really excited when the team asked me to do this last year, where I got to kind of like give my assessment of 2022 and kind of give my look forward to 2023. And I got some things right and I got some things wrong. But I want to talk about really what surprised me. And Matt, some of this is stuff that you and I talked about at various points of time over the last 12 months that I'm obviously gonna poke at you about a little bit too. But I think the big thing that surprised me the most was CISOs getting jailed for misrepresentation of security standards on their quarterly report. I absolutely did not see that suit coming in. I did not see that potential indictment for the SolarWinds CEO for that one. I think the overall consensus around the SEC adding a bunch of teeth to their kind of, if you call it, their regulatory arm when it comes to cybersecurity requirements. This kind of goes hands in hand with them really nailing down some definitive guidelines around what they see as material cybersecurity incident reporting. I think those kind of go hand in hand as well, because we actually did see that. I don't know if people have paid attention, but in Q4 of 2023, we had the first reporting of a company who reported on their 10K a material cybersecurity incident. And it was really sneaky, Matt, how they did it, right? So it was a Friday afternoon, literally a couple of hours before the street was going to close, and they dropped the 10K, and in that 10K they've added a section 1.08, I think it is, for material cybersecurity incidents that said, hey, we as a company detected, ironically, 3 days before, that there was a cybersecurity incident that might have a material impact on our Q4 reporting.
Yeah.
And then their stock dropped on Monday as everybody read their 10K ahead of their street call on the
Yes.
following Monday. So I think overall, seeing some of the SEC teeth was a pleasant surprise, sans the CISOs going to jail thing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, hey, it's always good to see you, and I'm glad that you're not wearing orange today. I think you looked much better in black, in my opinion. So,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. I mean, to see that the SEC called out in its complaint against SolarWinds what it called poor controls, right, along with misleading statements. Yeah, I mean, I think it's always been a tough job to be a CISO, and going into 2024, you have to add the SEC coming after you to the list of things on your list. So for sure.
If you think the SEC is the worst of that, I don't know if you saw this, and this was another surprise, Matt. So buckle up for this one. Just to show the rampant arrogance of some of the cybercrime groups that exist out there. There was one cybercrime group, Alpha V, everybody's heard of them, pretty profound. They hacked a company and were holding them for extortion like they typically do as a ransomware gang, threatened the company that if they didn't pay the ransom, they would turn them over to the SEC.
And they did, right? They
Oh,
actually sent a letter, right, to the SEC, like basically like, hey, we're the hackers that have, yeah, we've got our ransomware in this environment, and they did not disclose it per the new requirements. So yeah, it's good times right there.
what do you make of that? Like what type of I don't even know what type of behavioral to call that, where we see ransomware gangs weaponizing the enforcement arms that we were all hoping to make the industry more secure.
Yeah, it's tough, right? I mean, I think, well, probably most companies take their executive teams through some sort of tabletop, right, where they're trying to really talk through what happens in these scenarios. What does our war room look like? How do we make sure we've got the right people that are giving us counsel? Like, I certainly hope people are going through some of these scenarios and really thinking about it, because boy, it could get real quick. That's for sure.
Yeah, I know when I talked about especially the SEC guidelines when they talk about reporting security standards for the quarterly reports, that whole incident with SolarWinds. One of the things that I encouraged in my blog was an acceptance that there may need to be more honesty and transparency between folks like you as the CEO and folks like myself as the CISO. I think we don't talk about the quiet parts out loud enough. And you and I talked about this, I think a couple of days ago. When Query gets to be big, we've both worked in large organizations. When you get that FaceTime with the CEO, I hope it never comes to this, but gosh, there may come a time where I may only get 30 seconds to talk to you, Matt, and I've got to give you the status update of the cybersecurity program in a 30-second soundbite for you to take to the board or for you to take to your peers, in the industry or something like that. And being able to articulate that, I think, is going to be difficult. So I'm going to ask you, as my boss, when I've only got 30 seconds with you and I've got to be honest with you so you don't misrepresent our cybersecurity posture, what's your advice to me?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I say I think we have to have the purposeful time with the right people set aside to do that. So if something's happening and we need to have a conversation about it, we need to make that as efficient as possible. So we shouldn't be figuring out, where are we going to have this? What's the technology footprint look like? Are we jumping on a Zoom, or are we in a Slack channel? Or are we meeting in person? Who needs to be in that room? Like, is it just you and me? Do we make sure we include legal counsel representation? I mean, look, there is no one answer, I think, to any of that. It's different for different companies, whether you're public or private, and what that looks like. But I think the one thing that is consistent, I would think, good advice is, don't figure it out as it's happening. Like, figure it out ahead of time and make sure that you're ready to have those conversations. And then, look, I think if there's something that I've noticed just from following along over the last year or so, it's like, don't lie to the FBI. Right? I mean, that certainly doesn't seem to be good.
I think that's a pretty common trend is yeah, don't set yourself up to be lying for the FBI. So yeah, outside the SEC, I think the only other one, and AI made a pretty huge splash in 2023. I think ChatGPT did a really good job of accelerating the conversation around AI. And I can joke about this, having been on the technical side, being on the receiving side of a lot of cybersecurity products most of my career. I remember seeing the placards and the banners for all this AI-driven cybersecurity stuff at RSA back in like 2019 and 2020, long before AI was ever really a thing. But I think what we've really seen for AI is, the AI assisted cyber attacks have fundamentally outpaced AI cyber defense. And I was sitting, and I'll say this one last thing about that, is I was sitting at a talk at a conference here in Raleigh, and they were talking about why AI hasn't been super successful in cyber defense. And a lot of it has really boiled down to this, the assumptions that AI has to make in their language models as they go to try to answer the questions that you've gotten. There just isn't enough data, to help AI make some of those assumptions and those gaps of knowledge when you go to ask it a question around cybersecurity. And so I think, it's easy to do that as an attacker. We've got tons of data that we can support in the language models for that. But when it comes to cyber defense, apparently there's just not enough data for that AI to be advanced enough to help us in kind of that. What are your, I know you've got some heavy thoughts on AI as well. Kind of what are your thoughts on some of that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I would ask you, like, if you had to pick, one place to put your chips for 2024, do you think AI will have a bigger impact for the attackers or for the defenders?
I think AI will always have a bigger assist for attackers than defenders.
Yeah.
The adversary's ability, and again, just for everybody's awareness, like when I make this assumption, this is the data points that I use to make this. I spent 10 years in the Air Force doing offensive cyber for the National Security Agency, right? I've worked a lot with a lot of government agencies. I've worked a ton with the FBI. I've worked a ton with the CIA. I've worked a ton with the NSA. And it always takes longer to develop a countermeasure for a weapon that you're seeing for the first time. And the adversaries have the ability to generate a weapon for the first time, and for you to go, holy cow, how do I defend against this weapon?
Yeah.
And so I think any technological advance will always benefit an adversary before it ever benefits a defender.
I think you're probably right. You got way more experience in that area than I do, and I think for 2024, I think I would say the same thing. I think AI will probably have a bigger impact for the adversaries. But I think to flip that, because I don't want that to always be, and so to flip that, I would say in order for AI to really be good for the good folks out there, like we've got to figure out how to actually use it to our advantage, how to use it to have a broader understanding of what's actually happening, to be able to interpret what's happening against all the different controls we have, to be able to put the right data and the right information at the fingertips of those that are protecting our environment. So I think there's a ton of potential to it for sure, but I think that potential is it usually takes longer to realize than we want it to, right? If 2023 was the all out hype of AI and cyber, then 2024 is probably the year of deflated expectations for reality, right?
I like that, and I want to kind of dovetail that into one of my 2024 predictions. I think one of the things that I'm going to predict specifically to AI for 2024 is really that we're gonna see some targeted attacks against AI companies, AI models, AI emerging technologies. We're going to see some abuse of LLMs for disclosure. Actually, as a matter of fact, I think as soon as I published that blog, literally the next day, there was a Microsoft article out that talked about there was some data leakage in, one of their LLMs and their AI models. Yeah, exactly. And so
Yeah.
I think what we're going to see is we're going to start to see a lot of what we saw in the healthcare, which is we know that these LLMs are gathering in and taking in a whole bunch of data. Instead of just going after the companies, can I get access to the LLMs? Can I get access to the data models? And can I exploit those and
Yeah.
get whatever sensitive information is in them?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think the ability to, for organizations to start to really tailor the LLMs to their actual environments, like that's where things get really, I think, powerful. And I think we're still a little bit off from that, but I can see it coming for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned data, and I kind of want to talk about data a little bit. I wrote this as a surprise for 2023, and I don't want to back and forth between 2023 and 2024 too much. But since we talked about LLMs and we talked about data, I think what the AI, the LLM, the Chat GPT, balloon showed us, if you will, was it kind of exploded just the sheer amount of data that is available out there to aggregate in these LLMs, that is available to be had from a security perspective when it comes to organization, just shows the volume of data that a lot of these organizations have. I ran across a GitHub project called GPT for All, which is basically a project that allows anybody to download a large language model, take the data from their company, put it into this large language model, and then to ask it questions about the environment. So imagine I'm working for a Fortune 100 company. I've got 300,000 assets, in my organization. I can feed it all my asset inventory. I can feed it all my vulnerability data. I can feed it all my EDR data. And then I can start to ask questions like, hey, what do you see inside of my environment? And I want to use that to talk about, I want to double down both on something that I saw in 2023 that I still will think will continue to be a problem in 2024, and that is the sheer vast amount of available data that exists for security teams that they are in no way today poised to take advantage of.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, certainly a lot of places that we could go with that conversation, but I think, to offer a picture, like if we were standing around a whiteboard, I feel like there's external data that can be valuable and internal data that can be valuable. So if I'm thinking of a company, there's certainly knowledge externally that everyone is contributing to that's out in the world in general that's really helpful. And I think LLMs are seeing a lot of advancement around that. Internally, though, the idea of feeding those models internal data, well, I mean, boy, that certainly gives me pause, right? It's so when you start thinking about, a co-pilot, if you will,
Yeah.
of an LLM, the ability to kind of take advantage of both external data and knowledge as well as customized with internal data, I think that that's pretty interesting. And when we start to think about what we're doing at Query, I mean, like you mentioned training models and how it's getting much easier to do that. Like Duraj Sharan, our chief
Yeah.
scientist, has actually done some of that with GPT-4 and several other models as well, to take advantage of queries, data mesh, data fabric, data gateway, if you will. And I think that's an area where we'll continue to kind of press forward on how we can help companies maybe control the flow of access to what I'm going to call that internal, kind of keys to the kingdom data.
Yeah, I think I can remember building security teams in the past and thinking I had a really good control over all the data. And I look back then and I look now at the current data set that's available to security teams today. And even in our small little startup, it's astounding how quickly that data sprawl has gotten. And then when you talk about shadow IT and you talk about shadow data sprawl, you talk about anybody being able to swipe a card for SaaS applications, security teams are up against a wall when it comes to needing access to that data.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think security teams are going to continue to see more data that they need to make use of, not less. And as I said earlier, I think it's all about being able to use the right data at the right time and actually understand what you're looking at, right? You don't win points for having the data or being able to point to it, cheap cloud storage or whatever. It's all about how can I make use of this? And I think for a lot of organizations that I talk to, they're still in what I call the data collection mode.
Mm-hmm.
And the ability to kind of move from that to making it easier for the right people to draw the right insights at the right time. That's when I think things get a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of carry that over into what it means for security teams that are thinking about this and hearing this today. I think that they're kind of one of my other predictions for 2024 was I think that 2024 is going to be where we see a huge advancement in the coding capabilities utilized with AI to make it quicker and easier for adversaries to create some pretty crafty malware, some pretty crafty hacks that are going to be pretty difficult to to detect. And we've got a saying in the industry, right? It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And as soon as that attacker hits that box, because you're going to, if you're doing the right thing and you're doing an assumed breach mentality, they're going to get on that box. And so how are you gaining that visibility across that infrastructure, across your cloud? If you're lucky enough to have one cloud infrastructure, heck, hopefully you don't have all three cloud infrastructures that you're trying to gain visibility across. I think if you're not thinking about that data mesh and that data fabric, those advancements are going to sneak up on you pretty quickly.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And shameless plug time for Query. That's what we're helping people with, right? Is to make better use of the data that's all around them. I mean, I think increasingly we're seeing that teams need more access into IT data, more access into business data, like really just being able to draw insights using whatever data they need given the situation. And there's still too much friction in that. There's still too much friction in trying to onboard a new data source into your security operational picture, whether it's putting it into a traditional SIEM, a cloud SIEM. Like I still hear too much from teams that even if you can work out the architecture of onboarding a new data source, you then hit the roadblock of can we afford to bring this new data source into whatever we need. And as long as we have those challenges, I think it just makes it harder and harder for us to defend our environments.
Absolutely. I want to kind of pivot on you real quick, Matt. I want to kind of talk about another prediction I had for 2024. We've talked a ton about data. We've talked a ton about AI. There's a kind of a sub layer, if you will, sometimes when we talk about cybersecurity. And I think that I learned this the hard way when I was in the military, just how much that sub layer really kind of affects the security controls that exist in the in our environment. And it's really what happens in the global world around us, right? Because adversaries, as we talked about, just a minute ago with the AI, where they're very quick to adopt new weapons, they are very quick to take the current world events and use them to their advantage. And 2024 is set up to be a very, very, very politically, culturally, geopolitically, environmentally charged year. We've got, and it's an election year in the US. It's an Olympic year. There's, that's obviously a huge worldwide phenomenon as well. We've obviously got some ongoing global conflicts as well. And so I think I think the one of the predictions that I really want to double down on is there is going to be a ramp up of an information warfare campaign, some type of deception campaign, other cyber related activities that are going on around the geopolitical sphere, if you will. And again, not to get political or anything like that, but I think as cyber professionals, it is incumbent upon you to remember those things do affect the cybersecurity of your organization.
I think that's true. I mean, I think things definitely go in cycles, and to your point, like 2024, we'll see more than 50 elections, high stakes elections, if you will, across the world. So not just the United States,
Yeah.
but 50 different countries. And so I think you also touched on earlier that the adversaries are making pretty good use of LLMs and the ability to kind of weaponize various new things. So yeah, I mean, I think 2024 is going to be an interesting year, and it's security is a constantly changing space. We know that it's always been, and I think 2024 will be no different.
Yeah, absolutely. The last one that I want to hit for predictions, and then I'm all predicted out. And again, hopefully, I think my team dropped the links to the blogs in there. Make sure you guys go check those out and read those blogs so you can kind of read these in depth. I'm going to continue to double down on software supply chain stuff. I said it in my blog. And this is going to be one of those wild cards, Matt, that I think I'm about 50% convicted on this one. I think that we've either truly gotten ahead of cyber supply chain type of attacks, and we're not going to see any more of those, or we're going to get the big one this year.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we saw obviously Log4j. We've seen SolarWinds. It's not the first cyber supply chain, attack that I've seen in my career. We can actually go all the way back to things like Heartbleed and other open source projects and things like that. We saw NIST released a software bill of materials standard. I've personally seen it show up in a lot of our query third-party risk management forms from, getting asked from customers and things like that. And so I think that there is gaining traction in there. And so I think this is the year where, we talk about things being in cycles. This is a year where I think that cycle is going to be tested. Did we actually, as an industry, get ahead of it, or are we still behind on it?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Not a ton of data science behind this prediction, but I think we're going to see a ton more ransomware in 2024. Like I think just with some of the recent trends on how it's becoming even easier to have more widespread ransomware attacks. Like there's been an uptick in data theft involved with ransomware, as well as just data being held for ransom or destroyed. So I think we're going to see some more interesting things in that space in 2024.
I agree with that. Hey, Matt, so that's the end of my predictions. I appreciate you. It looks like we got a ton of questions from chat. I want to really, really give a huge shout out and thanks to chat for asking questions. If you've seen Matt and I together before, we absolutely, utterly love to talk, and we love questions on top of that. And so I'm gonna pick a couple of questions that I'm seeing that my team's dropping over here, Matt. Here we go. Let's do this one, Matt. This one's for you. How is Query preparing for this future?
Ooh, I think Query has been kind of really excited about this future for a long time. Like, one of my favorite sayings, for those of you that know me well, is I like to find security teams and companies that are living in the future. And what I mean by living in the future is that something about their business model or their operations is causing them to like rapidly adopt new trends. And so in the back half of 2023, like really in kind of Q4 of 2023, we started to see a lot of teams asking questions about how to make better use of data in cybersecurity operations. Like we're seeing more teams put data in S3. We're starting to see a lot of teams look at Amazon Security Lake. We're seeing teams that are using Snowflake and Databricks. We're seeing teams that are using data more often in GCP and BigQuery. And you know what we're really seeing is we're seeing teams that are playing with all of that. And so I think that that's really exciting for 2024. And what we're doing to prepare for that is we're trying to be really good listeners. Like we're trying to really understand like why are teams shoving data in S3? Like what's the problem that kind of led them to do that? And then once they solve the first part of the data problem, which is often pipelining and storage, what comes next? And how are those teams going to actually make use of that data? And what does that look like? Like if you go from, let's say, 5 terabytes average per day in your data picture for security operation to 500 terabytes of data per day, that's a massive change. And like, how are you actually going to make use of all of that data? So what that does is it introduces all these new problems that I think teams have never had before. And those are really the things that we're thinking about at Query. So, I mean, we are a data platform for cybersecurity operations, but we move way beyond the traditional types of data that you would see in a SIEM or in the normal tools that you're using. So those are some of the things we're thinking of for the future. What would you add to that, Neal?
I think when I think about my role as CISO at Query, right, and really protecting, kind of Query's business, right, and kind of supporting you, Matt, as CEO, and kind of supporting our customers, I really want to kind of continue to show that we are poised to handle the challenges of an expanding customer base, of a challenging data landscape, of a large, shifting cybersecurity threat model, as we come into a lot of this new innovation, if you will, when it comes to AI and to various centric ransomware gangs that want to rat you out to the SEC, and a lot of the challenges that I think are coming with a lot more oversight and a lot more involvement that CISOs have to deal with. And so I think continuing to be transparent from a security perspective, we have I'm very proud of us being forward leaning and going out and achieving a lot of industry level compliance so that we can kind of show that we're taking security by design seriously as a company, advertising that all over our website, giving a security and compliance page that's tied directly to our controls, so that you can kind of see in real time that we're monitoring and updating and staying in compliant with our control framework. I think gives you that transparency. I'm always excited to see how transparent we are around our architecture, around how we do business, so that you can kind of see that we are a company that cares about security and we care about you being secure. And so I think continuing to do that, continuing to eat our own dog food. I use the Query product. I don't have a SIM. I use a lot of the architectural choice that we get from Query, and that's been a lot of the things that I talk to my peers about. Is I now have the choice to design a security operations center the way that I want to, without a lot of the forced centralization, if you will, that has come with a lot of the legacy architectural designs. And so continuing to eat that dog food and continuing to talk about it and continuing to kind of support the business, I think that's the best that we can do, to support Query from a security perspective.
Yeah, it's great. It's awesome.
So we got another one here. This one says, what does Query think companies fail at the most?
That's an interesting one. What are your initial thoughts on that, Neal? You've got a ton of operating experience. Like, what are?
I wrote about this in my blog, and I will continue to say this. I think that the biggest thing that companies fail at the most are the basics. The simplest, most basic cybersecurity controls. I have seen far too often where there's a rush to the new shiny widget. There's a rush to the latest technology threat. There's a rush to the latest TTP, tactic, technique, and procedure from an adversary group. There's a rush to the latest invigorating headline in the news articles that drives cybersecurity strategy. And when you're chasing that dopamine drop of trying to solve the world's problems one invigorating headline at a time, I don't think you get an opportunity to go back and take a look at some of the basics in cybersecurity. And so those things can come from things like vulnerability management. Those things can come from, as we've talked about before, getting access to the data that you need to do incident response, right? Getting access to the data that you need to do inventories in your environment, to do, vulnerability management, to do forensics, to do threat hunting. That basic ability, that core ability to get visibility into your landscape, basic stuff. I think that is the mantra that I want to carry into 2024 for people who hear me talk. Is 2024 is the year of doubling down on the importance of basics from a cybersecurity hygiene perspective.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. If we added into that, like based on the companies that we've been talking to and what we saw in 2023, like what companies are struggling with when it comes to data and cybersecurity, I think it comes down to failing to really understand how a change in data architecture, a change in technology will ultimately be used by the operators on a daily basis. So, call it understanding the job to be done or whatever the operational capability is, really thinking through how everything is going to kind of come together. I think that's an area where the world can improve, because again, we end up having so many different tools, data in so many different places, that just having the data or having the tool available, that's not the name of the game, right? You've got to enable the right people to use it at the right time in order for it to have a positive impact. I'll throw one other prediction out there, and
Ooh.
you're a budget owning CISO, Neal. So
He's not telling you that my budget is zero, but we'll go on with it.
So I think that in 2024 there's going to be a little bit more scrutiny on like the bang for the buck
Oh
of the
yeah.
CISO's
Oh
budget.
yeah.
Like what do you think about that? And what are maybe some of your peers? I know you talk to a lot of people at Fortune 500, Fortune
Yeah.
1000. How are they thinking about that?
Yeah, and I like to tell stories when I do this too, right? Because one of the banes of my existence has always been to walk up to the CIO or the CFO or the CEO with a bill for all my cybersecurity technology to run my organization, and know that I was going to have to justify literally every single line item on there and what value that was providing to the organization. And invariably, there were tools that have baked in 30% cost increases. That we talked a ton about data. We continue to chase data, and some of those models are built around the more data that you put in, the more your costs go up. And so that's an ever flowing cost conversation. And depending on your perspective of the world, we are invariably in an economical tough spot, right? Whether you want to formalize it and call it a recession, whether you want to just like admit that, like, hey, the job market sucks, the economics suck, the interest rates suck. There's a lot of really terrible things that are happening fiscally around us on a day-to-day basis. And so, if I thought costs were bad, years ago, costs are ridiculously worse now. When I sit down and talk to, as a matter of fact, I had a dinner with a CISO last month where we went out to eat, and they're trying to figure out their costs because they just can't continue to pay these rising costs of these bills. And so I think that I wouldn't be surprised if the squeeze is felt even more this year than it was last year, because you know how it is. It's always tighter right before it gets loose. And
Yeah.
I think that that's where we're at. I think we're going to see a really, really huge price squeeze this year on everything across the board.
I think that's right. And it's cyclical, right? So like you decide to focus on something, you can't impact it immediately. Like particularly with budgets, you got to catch it at times of renewal and things like that. So
Yeah,
well, hey, this is great. I've long thought that being a CISO is one of the hardest jobs. And in an early stage company like this, you have a particularly challenging job because you have to not only protect us, but you have to wear a lot of other hats as well. So thank you very much. I know one thing for sure for 2024 is I'm going to have a whole lot of fun working with you. Like it's
absolutely.
2023 was great. I think we solved some big challenging problems. We're really getting great feedback from the market, and I always enjoy doing this. So thank you, Neal, and thank you to everybody out there for asking questions. And we intended to do this a little more frequently in 2024. So if you have any burning topics that you would love to hear Neal and I chat about, please reach out to us. But welcome to 2024, and thanks everybody. Have a great year. Stay safe. Take care of each other. See you later.